Welcome everybody to the latest Knowledge Network on Climate Assemblies call, this time on the on Poland's Citizens' Assembly on Energy Costs. This is a really interesting assembly, although it has a fairly standard assembly structure. It took place over a couple of weekends with an extra session for online voting. It involved 86 members who produced 100 plus recommendations. This all took place in late 2022, and much of its work was focused on questions of energy poverty. But we think it's a really interesting case for us to look at within the Knowledge Network for a number of reasons. One of the reasons is because they ran some pre-assembly engagement prior to the assembly, which involved around 700 people across 45 municipalities. And it's kind of interesting to understand how that kind of more mass engagement process linked with the actual assembly. Secondly, it was the first national assembly run in Poland, but it was run independently. It was run by an organization called the Shipyard Foundation, and we'll be talking to 2 or 3 people from that organization, and against what I think is fair to say is quite a politically polarized background. So in many ways, it was run as much to do something on the issue of energy costs and energy poverty, but also as a demonstration project. And finally, I think another interesting issue for us is that the salience of the assembly shifted during the process because of the Ukraine conflict, which was obviously happening on Poland's borders, and of course increasing energy costs. So I think in many ways, actually, the assembly became more salient than the Shipyard Foundation had originally considered. So during this assembly, during this meeting, what I hope to do is to try to work with colleagues from Shipyard Foundation to understand the motivations and objectives of what they were trying to achieve, some of the interesting design features, also talking about the political context and impact. And then we'll be joined by 3 commentators who'll talk to us about how they see the assembly fitting in within the broader Polish practice. We'll also be talking to a member of parliament who'll talk to us a little bit about what it looks like from a political perspective, and also a colleague from Hungary who will reflect on this challenge of running assemblies in highly polarized political contexts. I forgot to mention that we're being recorded, so you should know this in case you're worried about having your face or your comments recorded, and of course we'll be open for, if you can drop questions at any time into the chat, and we'll be really happy to try and get the various participants to respond to those questions. So what I'd like to do initially is bring in 2 people, 2 civic participation specialists who are involved in this project from the Shipyard Foundation. Excuse my Polish pronunciation, but we'll be joined by Maria Brozowska and Maria Jagaciak. I think I murdered that one, but that will do. So welcome, and first of all, congratulations on delivering the process, because we know how challenging this can be, and I hope it was 4 or 5 or 6 months ago now. I hope you've caught up with your sleep after it. So maybe you could start off by telling us what the motivations and objectives of the Shipyard Foundation were to actually run this assembly.
Thank you very much, Graham. We are really very excited that we are here. Thank you for the invitation. This is true. Last year was quite challenging, but also filled with a lot of excitement as well, I guess. And I will try to explain how the idea of organizing first nationwide assembly in Poland came up. The idea of democratic participation of participatory democracy in Poland is very close to the ideas of Shipyard Foundation, and also to our team, which is participation team. For over 14 years, we've been very much involved in such processes in Poland. And in recent years, apart from very high polarization in our country, we also could note the big, let's say, step back in the area of participation of people in stating law, in consultation, different laws locally, but also, and which is most important, on national level. And this is due to the present government attitude towards such tools of consultation tools. So we thought that it could be very important to test, to show ourselves, but also to citizens and also to local and national authorities, that such process as nationwide consultation assembly can be very useful for our democracy, and we thought that it will be very good to organize it. Right from the start, I think we knew that this process will need to be organized independently from bottom up, because we knew that the support of present government will not be very big. And also we thought that involving present authorities on national level into the process might be not very good for the tool itself. So we even thought we wanted to involve them somehow, but we had discussions internally that we really don't want to involve them as main organizers or patrons or hosts of the whole process. Also due to this polarization of citizens, we knew that it will be much easier to involve citizens in it and invite to participate in the process citizens if it will be not marked with the logo of the eagle, which is the mark of our country. When we were thinking of the topic that will be best for that kind of pilotage, let's say, in our country, we knew that it needs to be a topic that will not divide people, but will bring them together. And it will be a topic that will be a big problem, but also a kind of problem, visible, tangible, easy to understand, because yes, to more, so they could really imagine what we will be really talking about.
So can I just jump in on that one? So was the choice of the topic of looking at energy costs and particularly questions of energy poverty, would that be seen as less politically controversial than, for example, looking at a broader question like climate change? Would that?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
So in Poland, we have the situation that the support of actions that are focused on mitigation of climate change is not so high. It's quite low. It is growing with recent years, but still talking about climate will, when you have the climate word in it, would be probably more, maybe controversial is not the best word here, but difficult, I think, to talk with people. And energy poverty as a problem is a part of a whole picture which climate is. So we had this topic was giving us opportunity to talk also about quite deeply about climate aspects. So I think we achieved this. We achieved the discussion on climate with participants, but of course it was a kind of background for this problem that was the main topic.
Yeah. I think that like what Marysia mentioned is very important, because we didn't want to create opportunity for people to give, like, to not wanting to take part in the conversation because they didn't feel that it's their agenda. And energy poverty doesn't give this leftist agenda that we would be marked if we talk about climate transformation, which is a big problem in Poland. And there are a lot of people who are talking about giving up coal or not giving up coal. And if we are talking about this kind of subject, which is narrower, but still taking into consideration like climate agenda, but not in the title, it gave us opportunity, because we think we succeeded in it, to be like for people on the left side and also for people on the right side, and for all of the parties to make it important for them, and not to give us this mark of some agenda that we didn't want.
Yes.
And do you think working on I'm just kind of pushing, because a lot of the national assemblies have been trying to deal with climate as a, which is a really, obviously, so many different areas of policy in one go. Do you think there are advantages to focusing on a much tighter policy agenda? Do you think you are more likely to generate more detailed and more precise recommendations, or was it more the political issue that, trying to avoid the sort of the sort of polarization issues that drove you that way? Do you actually think there are advantages in going into this tighter agenda?
Well, I would say it depends, probably, but in our case, but in general, I think it's a good idea, because then your recommendations are more precise. And of course, we had 120 of them, and they were very different, more detailed and more general ones. So this is a separate subject that we could talk about here for quite a long time, probably. But I think that well, the general directions that, in my opinion, come out from assemblies that have more general topics. I don't want to hurt anyone here by saying this, but I think they are more general and more obvious, let's say. And when you talk about a more precise and narrowed topic, I see that the recommendations and the solutions are really very targeted, let's say. So in our case, I think it was good. I just want to add one more thing. You have to bear in mind that we made a choice of this topic 3 years ago, or even now 3.5 or so. So back then, we really thought it's narrow, but also safe.
And then you have the war. And then you have the war in Ukraine.
Exactly. Then we come to this point when we started the project at the end of 2021, when we already saw some increase in prices of different products. And then in February, 2 weeks before the inauguration of the project, the war began, and we were wondering whether even we should continue proceeding with the assembly, and we should, yes, because Maria, she will explain that we were entering the first phase of our assembly, which was focused on involving locally people. And back then, people locally were involved in very different tasks, let's say, focused on Ukraine, support people, etc. So it was really quite, and those three crises actually caused that we had to be very flexible through the whole process, and it was very dynamic, and we had to adapt many times during the whole process. And of course, we started the project before, when spring was starting, before summer, and we knew that our assembly will start right at this, like on the border of autumn and winter. So we really didn't know how it will go, and if the topic will not explode into our faces. I don't know if you understand,
yeah.
If English it is well said, but we also, the other thing that we were worried about is that people will focus now on more, daily solutions, not on a
systemic change.
Yes, like long-term solutions. So this was also our worry, but thankfully somehow we managed to manage this process in the way that really people were focused on really long-term recommendations.
I think it's really interesting to me, and I'll talk a bit with Kuba about it in a minute about some of the impact. But I mean, when you took this project on, you probably had no idea of, as you say, you have no idea of the salience of the issue at the moment you're going to be doing it. I think it's a really interesting. It's sort of a really interesting insight for us how external conditions can really affect the sort of context for these kind of processes. So you mentioned, Maria, the fact that the assembly actually in many ways had sort of two sections to it. It had the classic assembly, which is what we talk about a lot in the knowledge network of the sort of randomly selected citizens through democratic lottery, the kind of deliberation. But beforehand, you'd actually run quite an extensive local engagement process. Could you tell us a little bit about how that process ran? Why did you do it for a start? Because why didn't you just rely on this on this assembly? Why did you feel the need to do the earlier engagement, and how did that then feed into the process?
Well, we thought that we had a very long conversations about how to create this kind of project to make it more effective and to engage more people, because we had previous experiences with both assemblies, but on local government level, and this kind of local communities conversation. We call them civic councils. Like 2 years earlier on, which were about education, and combined together over 1,000 people, 1,500 people. And we knew that we need a process that is more complex to engage more people, more perspectives. And we were watching processes in Canada about energy. We were looking at some kind of international experiences to give us some kind of like more perspective into this kind of long-term change that we want to have when we are planning this kind of project. And that's why we wanted to have a local component before the assembly. And we weren't sure if you want to use the methodology of a citizen assembly. In fact, we were like searching for some other mechanisms, because we know it's not perfect. But when we started to work with the European Climate Foundation, that was the founder of our of our project. They wanted it to be an assembly, so we incorporated it, but still adding this local component. And how did it work? We wanted to have local conversations in local communities and run by local communities with our tools. And in somehow they had the same, like almost the same agenda. We had this scenario that they could make longer or shorter, but some of the parts were always there. And we gave also educational tools such as videos, such as materials to use in the conversation. And what was needed, especially in this Ukrainian war context, because they were all hands on board in very different areas than other local councils, they needed us to provide some kind of financial support and as well some kind of organizational support, because the staff wasn't there always. So it was more difficult for them to fill in our project. So we needed to give especially more financial support for them to by catering, etc., to provide room for the conversations.
But also for moderators and experts. I think this was a key challenge for the local councils to have the qualified person that will be able to run the meeting.
Yeah, this was the thing that we didn't. Thought through very good, because when we were doing the previous one on education, there were people that could like run the conversation. It was easy for them, and the subject that we provided, energy poverty, was much more complicated. So they weren't prepared to facilitate a meeting on a subject that wasn't very easy for them to talk about, to answer questions. So they needed more support, like expert support on the meeting, and also some kind of facilitators that they wanted financed by us.
So what kind of so you provided them with a toolkit, basically, kind of like the kind of how to run it, how to run something locally? Is that, did you have a particular some resources, some shared resources for
yes
them?
So we had a lot of resources. Like there was a lot of job done, because we had a whole manual on the energy poverty subject, and there was also a manual on how to run a local council. So it was 10 steps of running, like leading from how to do information, how to prepare for the moderation, for the facilitation of the meeting, how to prepare a room for the meeting, etc., etc. We provided like a scenario base that was with options from 2 hours meeting to 2 days meeting. So this scenario, you can cut parts of it and make it more advanced or less advanced. To be true, most of them took the less advanced 2 hour meetings.
But this is due to the Ukrainian war, I guess, because we were encouraging, the target group of this invitation to organize local councils was targeted to very different groups, not only to NGOs, but also to informal local leaders, to many different non-formal groups, but also to local authorities. So I think from 45 local councils, 11 were organized by local councils, local authorities, and we were counting, to be honest, that more of them will get involved. But this is what happened with the war coming.
Yeah, completely understandable.
Yes.
How did you how did you feed what came out of those conversations in the Civic Council into the Assembly itself? How did you enable that to happen? Because you get a lot of information coming from these 45 different conversations with 700 participants. How do you then integrate that into the Assembly?
We tried to make this agenda of these meetings to be like a small-scale assembly. So we wanted to incorporate the educational part with these videos and materials that we provided, and then some time for a discussion and for a verdict as well, which was like, it was difficult to have this kind of verdict after a 2 hours discussion, but still we asked each and everyone attending in the meeting to fill the a bit too long form at the end and give their verdicts on the subject. So we had a lot of data to work on, and it also had like some personal data, not personal data, like this metric, age, gender, etc., etc. So we could combine this data. So we had a lot of data on people's opinion on the subject. What came out that people didn't quite understand the energy poverty subject. It was very difficult to them to create their opinion. It was very hard for our research team to give some kind of a framework to that. So we knew before the assembly that we need to focus really deeply on understanding the subject. So it was very helpful for us in this matter. They gave us also some hints on the directions that they are open to, like energy, like solar energy, like renewables, etc., etc. And when you combine it with the results of the assembly, it is quite similar. So maybe the meetings were shorter and less deep, but still the main verdict is quite comparable. And I think it's very important to stress out.
If I might just add one thing, because I think that people, they understood who is touched with the energy poverty problem, but I think that finding the solutions and going deep into this subject was quite difficult for them, and they were having a lot of questions to experts. So these local councils also were very good, I think, for our experts to see what kind of questions people have, what they will be expecting in the future during assembly. Yes, what language is the best and the clearer, how they should explain different topics. Because I think that the most difficult part was to understand the propositions of solutions. This was quite challenging, I think, for.
But I mean, it's the main thing it did for you was to help you frame the actual assembly, the way that you approach those questions in the assembly. I can see the value of that. So just before I bring Kuba in, what was your just a quick question? What was your highlight of the assembly, the whole process? What was do you have a particular thing that when you think of the assembly, oh yeah, that was a real highlight for me? Do either of you have a highlight moment?
We were thinking about this. what were them? Well, I think that the whole process was really very intense, and we really wanted to prove people who got involved in local councils, but also the assembly, and put a lot of work in it. that there will be some, some change, let's say, that the whole thing that they were doing, the whole work will not be wasted. So I think that the summer meeting where 100 people showed up, and among them really top level politicians and the medias, and I think this was something quite impressive for us, but it was not confirmed till the last moment. So this is why we are quite, I think, happy with this. But the fact also that this group of people gathered at the assembly got very close to each other, and that they really had very good feelings of the whole process, and they were sharing it with us. It was really kind of highlight as well, I guess.
Yes, I would how do you say it, like thumbs up for what you said, like the aspect of bringing people together and reminding ourselves that it is possible to talk together and to have a conversation in a very polarized group, because they were representatives of all the like smaller, bigger cities, etc., and all of the political parties. Maybe a little bit more on the climate agenda. They were open to this. But that this kind of conversation is possible and leads to a belief that this kind of making a democratic change is possible, and as well on the local level, because people, like, it was maybe an added value that they were very happy to have this kind of opportunity to just talk in a different manner that they usually do. And as well on the assembly. But I think it's the thing that in this group, it's quite obvious that you believe in it. But for us, it was very, very, very nice to see it.
Okay, that's really great. In fact, what you've just said about the sort of seeing a group of people in what is a polarized political context, having those kind of debates, actually brings us on to, if we can bring Kuba into the conversation, that would be really great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thanks, Kuba. So Kuba is chair of the board of the Shipyard Foundation. So first of all, congratulations, Kuba, on the project, and congratulations for having such fabulous colleagues who actually delivered this stuff. Kuba, again, I'd like to come back to this theme that I started talking to Maria and Maria about, which was this issue about having to run this assembly independently. And not like many assemblies are having the, trying to get it commissioned by government. And I just wonder if you have any thoughts on this kind of, sorry, I'm in the middle of London and someone's just gone past with a very loud motorbike. So I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that sort of challenge of, can you run these kinds of processes sponsored by public authorities in this kind of polarized context, or is it really always going to be these kind of independently run processes that are going to have to be the way forward in your kind of context? Do you have any thoughts about that, Kuba?
Oh, I have plenty of thoughts. The question is, we have very limited time, but I'm speaking to you from Copenhagen. Nobody is even honking, and in the Center of Design, government-sponsored Design Center for Innovation, and they have the claim, we are independent government-funded institution, which seems like almost a kind of oxymoronic in a certain context. But to be honest, I don't. Obviously, that was very special, and since I'm in this organization from the very beginning, it is although it was not just 2 years, but this is kind of an interesting mistake. It is, yes, two years, but this kind of effort to modernize and somehow oxygenate Polish version of democracy was an effort for that organization since it started. So we have, for example, and we have moments of glory and success. More or less 10 years ago, we're able to enforce, in a sense, with working with other academics, trade unions, other people, to create something which is called 7 principles of a public consultation, which technically is obligatory for government even right now, for that government. Obviously, they completely ignored the thing, but that was a process of a kind of a credo of what we believe should be a kind of a participatory process of a kind of a legislative practices. So that's the one thing. So that's a kind of another attempt to go from the other other perspective for that. Democratic deficit is not only Polish disease, I would say. I mean, we're all wrong in a sense. I understand the reason for existing that very group who I have the honor to speak to, is to obviously to somehow admit that fact, that the kind of a democracy without this kind of the effort, procedure, curation, if you like, is suicidal, basically. And I think that's I wrote 3 years ago, the document called The Other Version, or The Other Model of Democracy, which has some grip in a kind of a public debate, which is basically create a concept of I would say effortless democracy as suicidal, and basically I wouldn't say the painful democracy, but basically this version which demands something more than emotion, more than a kind of egocentric approach. It's more kind of a Republican in the best possible way. It means that you have a kind of you have a concern for public issues. But anyway, that our experiment in Shipyard of a national debate, if you like, we're still looking, the words are incredibly important, I think. A public, it means, like a panel. It's still something new, and people might have a very different kind of a perception of what is panel, including especially in Poland, kind of a modernization, technical modernization. Anyway, I'm joking, but that part is a part of one much bigger machinery. And being honest, it was already mentioned. It was designed as almost a full 5-cycle process, which has all those kind of a moment of creativity, of looking for solutions. And then you have this national conversation. I think we are closest to the model of a national conversation on something, put it that way. We were already testing several elements of that. And one of them was this national conversation and this has to be said, especially in this environment and in this group of people, although we all have academic credits, if you like, we are not academic. And I wouldn't say we are proud of that, but it has to be very clear that we are, especially on my side, is very also, I wouldn't say pragmatic, but involved in a sense. The Shipyard was involved, for example, in this national conversation education during the biggest strike since 1989 of teachers in this country. And some 40,000 teachers was basically close themselves in schools and trying to explain what they want in a sense. So we developed within really 2-3 weeks a kind of a template of conversation for those schools, and 150 schools were basically sitting, teachers, parents, pupils even, to have a transformative really experience of talking about what kind of future what kind of education we need. And that is a very strong element of that action that, as I understand, the democratic, in a sense, mandate, if you like, goes, we are trying to test both elements. One is basically wideness, if you like, kind of a spreading that, self-selecting as many people as possible, especially in a country like Poland, which is a unitary country, but is very much decentralized. So reason for talking locally is also that I would say like 70% of those kind of beyond educational effect, I think majority of those proposals and solutions are basically locally based. Some of them is about your home and your behavior. Some of this is about your local government. We have 2,500 local communities, kind of a democratically elected. And on the top of that, you have some kind of a national framework of legislation. So the one kind of in a sense, idea is to talk as wide as possible. And we have some bright, I hope, visions and possibilities to have this conversation as a mechanism. And the second is basically a traditional panel, put it that way, of selecting 100 people. So we believe that we have this kind of in a sense, is kind of a hybrid of those two, and we think it's quite unique. The beginning of that was, I think, similar. We're not the only country which started with this kind of a bottom-up. I think G1000 is also take its roots from the anger of citizens, of, I wouldn't say incompetent, but basically kind of the frustration of government being not able to address really important issues. And in the document I mentioned, there are like 17 issues, And urban poverty, not urban, energy poverty was not one of them even. That is everything from whether we need a public media, or since they were so much politicized, we should basically get rid of that. You know, the retirement age, model of education, access to public services, to the very, very hot issues like abortion regulations, for example. Basically, we were looking 3 years ago for something which will be peaceful meal, basically to test whether things work and whether people can talk about something. And we stand where we stand with this kind of energy poverty thing. The whole kind of environment changed so much. So we start with this kind of risk of having no wind. We are from Shipyard, so obviously the question of whether you have wind or not in the sail is important. So we're thinking, okay, it would be so boring. To the situation which was described by Marysia, beginning of war, where we think, you know, the wind is so strong, there are so many other issues around that it's even kind of probably even embarrassing to start that conversation. But basically right now we understand the energy. It's absolutely key issue. It's not the wind, it's a hurricane in a sense. Although we don't know how to frame it in a language kind of a sensitive. We use the energy poverty because it's closer to people's doors. If you think about climate in Poland, that's the way the energy poverty, where the climate knocks the door. Otherwise, people think, okay, maybe climate, maybe this, maybe that. But that was something, kind of an entry point to the conversation that was obvious. But we're still not sure whether we should think about the energy right to energy or energy poverty. It has completely different dynamic, etc. I don't know. Probably you are around that thing. It probably is not the last conversation about the energy and about climate. Sorry, we were like contemplating right now to have a national conversation of issue of water, for example. But basically, I know that we have a fabulous guest, senator from Poland, but we were talking about generally the question of energy as a precious something. It's almost like a spice from Dune, which has to be a subject of a democratic conversation, because we're entering kind of a Churchillian moment where basically politics, right now it's only trade-offs. And we see in Poland that we have to find the way of having new form of social contracts. You can see, last week in Paris, even if you have such a, the full of debate country, if you like, you still have this question, how you can build a social contract.
So can I just jump in? I think it's really interesting. So my question initially, and you sort of answered it in some ways. Do you think that this kind of conversation that you're trying to hold, and I completely understand you, I think your model is really interesting. Do you think that needs to be convened by an independent body like yourself? Because so much of this work around panels, around conversations, people look to it to be commissioned by government. Do you think there is value in it being organized by an independent organization like yourselves, or does that come at the risk of not having the kind of opportunity for policy impact, or does it have other benefits? And so I'm just trying to understand, is your vision, so G1000's vision in many ways, was to run this big demonstration project, and then in order that national governments and public authorities would pick this up and start doing it. They've not run another one since. Yeah. Do you see this as something which civil society should be doing? Or are you is this a demonstration project to try and get government to be doing this? So I'm really interested about your kind of, your sort of theory of change here, or your kind of sense of what it is that, who should be the key actors here? Does that make sense, Kuba?
Yeah, it's making a lot of sense, although I don't, the answer is I don't know. I understand there are several, obviously we have our own kind of, it's good to name that particular experience as a kind of an experiment, because in Poland, seeing is believing. You have many people after the panel who, seeing an 8 minutes movie, they became completely enthusiastic, including top politicians, absolutely top politicians. They say, oh God, why we are not trying that thing, for a long time. So, we have to make that thing. And that was exactly the role of the NGO, to put, as I said, to put the head to the place where politicians would not even put the leg. And that was something, it cost us a lot. In terms of the who is doing what, is obviously a question of who is paying, who is listening, and who is performing that technically. And I think it might be, it's not, in a sense, there's a question in front of us. all those three questions are extremely important. In that case, who was paying, although there is a kind of a tons of money around energy, we were very careful. And actually by itself, it's interesting that the donor we feel safe, it's still external foundation in a sense. I think a lot of panels here. And it's great right now. It will be, and last week or the 3 days ago, there was this kind of an end of a consultation of the package, what is called Defense of Democracy, which was published by the Commission, which is basically who is paying for creating, mechanism, even of those kind of mechanism, and what is the role of the EU money, what is the role of the private foundation, etc. So the question who is paying will be a very significant question, although our panel has a budget 40 times less than, for example, Irish panel or the British panel. So the question of who is paying the one. Second is who is basically organizing in from technical view. I think we were very well positioned. It's almost idiomatic. Shipyard has a very strong relational power, if you want. In this kind of a theory of network, you have this Gronevetter's concept of the strength of weak ties. We are extremely well, however it must sound, we are a very strong weak tie. Having being able to connect people on this map of the even urban energy poverty is about 200 institutions, and none of them has a single mission. Energy poverty for us, one of the most complicated thing, it was to push them together to this kind of a wicked problem, which is not just clean air, which is not just a poverty. It's not the health conditions. It's not about the habitat. It's basically together. That was a very tough for us. But I wouldn't say a dream, but obviously for Shipyard, we in a sense, however, we probably will do something on the climate. But for the kind of a sake of the provocation, we want to get rid of the energy poverty as soon as possible, because we understand that we should go, further to do other stuff. Right now, we have a 5 month to election. We are struggling to convince, with some success, political parties of a democratic opposition, but not only, to say that thing should be, I use my own vocabulary because it's unofficial, the third chamber, which means that we have two-chambered parliament. So kind of a slash Irish concept of having a group of people who might be invited to deal with the really, really complex issues of the not technical nature, but the question of rather fairness. And I think that's the name of a game right now. And we have already 2 political parties which are sympathetic to that and make it technically part of the program, but with 2 other political parties of opposition, I don't think it will be a problem. The problem will be not, but it's a very nitty-gritty of the Polish kind of a situation to make it a common idea of all opposition, not to basically trying to be more democratic than other party to say, okay, we are the first to be for panels. But anyway, we can manage this. Right now, since we don't have someone who is listening, we have a lot of hard work, try to interest different people in this outcome of that civic conversation. Everything from NGOs we create is again unique, I think, that we bring together all our partners or the big group of our partners, looking for a hero in a sense, to say, okay, you have your own agendas, but basically energy poverty, it's not the single mission of any of you. So we are testing a kind of a leadership model to say who is going to be kind of informed and somehow addicted to the thing for the long time present. So there will be, next few months will be decisive, including the fact of the competition. I'm a big believer in this kind of a 2-stroke engine, if you like. I think this, again, closest to the Irish, which is a mix of panel and the referendum. And, right now we have a question, for example, about abortion, whether it's just referendum, and I have a strong argument this is probably the most antagonistic way of making decision is just referendum. But it's decisive. And I think the mix of 2, panel and the referendum, is a good mix. And I think my kind of a dream future is basically we create the kind of apparatus to be able and to have a kind of a methodology to do one by one those issues which are unavoidably issues we have to solve as a community.
Okay, thanks. That's really helpful, Kuba. Kuba, I'll bring you back in a bit, but I'm going to turn to we're going to get 2 or 3 commentators on the process. And first, I'd like to invite Agnieszka
Pędzich.
I can't get your surname right. I'm really
Agnieszka
sorry.
Pędzich. So.
Thank you so much. I had it written down phonetically, and then I can't even read that. So, I'm just interested about whether you can place what the. So first of all, I think you're involved in facilitating the process. So again, congratulations on your work in that. But you're also involved in a sort of wider context of assemblies in Poland, and I'm just wondering whether you can reflect on the kind of conversation we've been having about the challenge of sort of running these sorts of processes, at national level. Is it a similar kind of problem at local level? What's happening on the ground in Poland? Yes,
this is participating in this shipyard assembly was a real a great opportunity to be involved in it. And the national level was something really very exciting, as Marisha mentioned, but also totally different challenges that we noticed than when we have it on a local level, when it's not bottom up, but then there is someone who's ordering the process. There is this subject being already somehow defined. We know who's paying for that, and what is the area of decision that we can have, and what kind of recommendations are being expected somehow. And the city hall officials, they are in the process and somehow interfering with the process in a way, but also supporting it, because generally what I would say that this kind of, we have three parties there, like citizens, experts who deliver the knowledge, the expertise on the topic, and we have the city hall officials, local authorities, when we talk about local assemblies, and this educational part is actually happening in between all these three parties, because citizens also learn during this process how the city works, how this decision are being made. They see the dilemmas that those who made final decisions that they have, the broader perspective of this consequences, etc. And they can really relate to the challenges they face. And when we talk about this common good, when we talk about the solutions for the whole city, it's really making them feel kind of responsible for that, and that's what we observe. And in this assembly, this national-wide, when there was no decision maker in the room, but still they were at the tables. We were talking about those who govern, what should they do, and it's still somehow like a ghost rule, that they are referring that these discussions are actually possible and fruitful only if they think that they are going for some reason, that there will be someone who will reply to them, who will correspond to them somehow, yes, and that these solutions will not, this time won't be wasted, and that they will be taken into account. So this meeting, this different perspective is kind of crucial thing during this process. And also what we noticed and what was very inspiring with this Shipyard Foundation process is this having this framework predictable, but not at the same time flexible, to follow the flow of the group, and to give them this safe space for experimenting, for meeting this perspective, which was sometimes really, really difficult, because there was loads of information, loads of different kinds of own challenges and own situations and different experiences that people came from different parts of Poland, which was challenging as such, because it's not that they are people living in the same area, like in a city context, but they live everywhere. And getting them together to talk about the real problem, and to try to feel like those who may be in the crisis of energy poverty, and have this responsible and committed attitude. That was really a great. I mean, it was keeping up this motivation. That was a great challenge. What was perfectly done here, and that was inspiring for us when we. A few months later, we've just finished an assembly in Krakow on sustainable transportation, which we thought might be kind of controversial topic, but you know, we kind of talked about this concentration on the common good, on the whole city and whole community perspective. So that was that was our learning experience from this process. Yeah.
So you're I mean, I'm assuming that the kind of the polarization that Maria and Kuba have been talking about also is also sort of present at the local level. Yeah. But you're saying actually these you're finding that these kind of spaces can actually hold that kind of polarization.
Yeah, and they can somehow park that aside when they're sitting and talking about the real problems, the real lack of parking spaces in the city, or congestion or traffic jams, or when we were doing together with Shipyard the assembly on climate and renewable energy sources in Warsaw, when they are talking about energy in the city. And it's even that was fascinating, that this is a self-regulating microcosmos, that the people were just bringing them together and to talk about the issue and not about something what's happening in political issues or some ideological matters.
And in terms of the kinds of assemblies that have been happening at the local and municipal level, have they tended to be promoted by one particular party or one particular? Does it tend to be the more? It's actually happening across the political context, is it?
Well, we've not. Well, there is always an owner of the process, like the city hall and the president, whichever option he or she is. But generally, it is they are the ones we were involved were kind of climate and sustainable development related. So all the social organizations, like social organizations and parties working for the climate, for this sustainable development, they are involved and they are promoting the idea as such. But no one is trying to get the political responsibility for the political ownership of that. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think.
Okay. Well, thanks for that. Thank you. And just again, thank you again, and congratulations so again for the work you've done.
You.
The second person I'm bringing in is Danuta. I'm going to give this a go. Jawazieska. I don't think that pronounced that
Jazłowiecka.
I tried.
Okay.
Who is a member of the Senate of the Republic of Poland, and so thank you very much for sparing us some time, Danuta. So I'm kind of interested to hear what your reaction to this process was as someone within the parliamentary system, who obviously this is being run outside of Parliament, being run independently. And so what's your perspective on what you've seen and what you've learned and what you've observed?
Thank you for inviting me for this meeting, and great thanks for Foundation and their important job they made on very professional way, really very professional way. As Maria and Kuba said, the political scene in Poland is very polarized. So there is diversity in the commitment and interest of carrying out the energy transformation in the country. On the side of the opposition, we are very much involved in transformation, and we would like to find the best way, effective way of implementation of Fit for 55. So we established in the Senate special committee, extraordinary climate committee, because in Senate we have a majority of the opposition, so that was easier to do this, and we have much more room to intervene to work on this subject. So the experience and the job what was made by Solidarity Foundation for us today is a kind of the model how to work with citizens. All we know that energy poverty is the main subject in this transformation, not only for Poland but for all of the countries. So it's very important to join the people for this whole process and to make them beneficiaries for this. And the way the foundation choose is one of the best. And I think that having as much experience they have, they not have to, they must continue this way. And probably they can, and as far as I know, they have some kind of multiplicators, and they can build a special structure of multiplicators in each of regions, several of them, and solve the problems this way. Kuba was saying something like this, that he would like to follow the model of Ireland. They organize this kind of panels. So I have to tell you that personally, I was thinking to do in my region, a region which has the biggest energy poverty, as I noticed from the experience of a foundation. So I'm very proud of their job, and I'm very happy that there is someone who is doing this. And also I'm happy that politicians from our side, they are interested of it, because this is not easy to convince politicians that the voice from the people is the most important. We have feeling that this voice is only during campaign.
Yeah.
But after that, I know everything. I can do it, whatever I want, and this is not necessary to talk with them daily. But this way is one of the best, to talk with them daily and to catch their smartness, their vision, their creativity, and to use them for preparing the law and implementing this law. This is I think this is the most important. I have funny experience working in European Parliament. I have had some directives to prepare, and the first meeting I organized for the politicians with whom I was responsible to work, I told them I would like to prepare a law which will motivate people. And they were, what are you doing about? What are you talking about? But we did. So I think that we have to, in whole Europe, even in the whole world, we have to change the way of working of the politicians. And this example is one of the best.
Do you see this? I mean, it was a question I asked Kuba, and I'll ask you: is this something that you see that government and parliament should actually be organizing itself, or as in, you know, commissioning itself, or do you think this is actually important to stay as a more independent conversation that's happening? I mean, it's a really interesting question about whether you think that this can be institutionalized within sort of Polish politics.
Mm-hmm. For developing and keeping very strong democracy is very important for this organization to be independent and be very, very strong, even stronger than politicians, especially in our country, because in our country, politicians lost the credibility. So especially in the subject as transformation, which is one of the most important and the most difficult to do it, especially in our country, because so far we didn't join the structural funds of this transformation. So we'll have very short period of time to do this. And the national government doesn't prepare any way and a strategy how to do it. So this is very important to have on the same boat organization like Foundation, which has a lot of experience, which have contact with people and can bring the most important expectation of the people.
Okay, and what sort of in terms of policy in this area, in terms of sort of public debate in this area, what sort of impact do you feel that this process has had? Do you feel that it's actually raised the nature of political debate, of public debate, or is it at the moment too early to say?
I think this is too early, especially because we met with Foundation and with Kuba and his team. We met once, and that was special meeting of the opposition members of the parliament. So I think that this is very good situation, because the opposition is on this side. The opposition is interesting of working this way, and in this committee we try to build special model. So we are working directly on the European law, discussing this like in European Parliament, discussing this. After that, we organized a meeting with commissioners, with reporters, discussing what we are thinking about it. So the same we would like to do with organization. And I don't know if you know this, that Kuba has opinion in Poland as a guru of non-government organizations. So this is a very important person, and his team is very important to do this, because people believe them and they will join them. They have very big success of this project. So I think that will be much easier than at the beginning to spread this experience and to build very strong non-governmental organization in Poland, which is really, especially now for the Poland, is very, very important.
Okay, thank you so much, Danuta, and thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. But that's really helpful. I'm just going to bring in one other final commentator, who's Eva Bordas, who works for Demnet in Hungary, and is very experienced in running very similar kinds of processes. And Eva, I'm just wondering, you've been listening to your Polish colleagues talk about the kind of challenges they face and the sort of the context of trying to run assemblies in highly polarized in highly polarized environments. You've also heard from Danuta about how we might bring this into the sort of realm of everyday politics. How much of this sounds similar to what's happening in Hungary? Are there differences? Do you have any lessons you can offer in terms of how this might move forward in Poland?
Sure. Thank you, Graham, first of all, for this invitation. It's really great to be in this call together with you. And let me start by congratulating our Polish colleagues and Shipyard Foundation for putting this project together. It is really massive and brilliant. And for sure, we will turn to them once we get there, when we are organizing our first national level citizens assembly, because it's important to emphasize that in Hungary, we have not had a national level citizens assembly yet. We have only had citizens assemblies at the local level. And another important distinction is that all of the Hungarian CAs were commissioned or hosted by the local government. So our situation or our experience so far is a bit different in that sense. But actually, yes, I also think, and this has been raised before, I think that one of the biggest questions, especially in a highly polarized political context, is how and how much political forces are involved in a representative deliberative process. If opposing political parties are able to work together and also how they react to each other's initiatives of calling for a representative deliberative process. And actually, I see 4 possible options or approaches here. One is that they manage to cooperate. So this is what ideally happens and what we see in Western Europe, because, obviously, I mean, citizens' assemblies.
Not always.
Not always, sure, not always, but ideally, most of the cases it happens. And, it's that's the ideal situation, because citizens' assemblies should, of course, be independent and non-partisan. So the second option I see is that political parties, or some political parties, they ignore them. The third option is that they attack them, especially if the CA was initiated by the opposing political parties. Or there's a fourth option, which is that they try to co-opt them, or especially if you talk about a less democratic political system, some political forces may even initiate one themselves to technically hijack the whole concept of citizen assemblies to push their own agenda. I'm not going to go into this fourth option in detail now, because we do not have the time, and it's a really, really tough issue. But I would like to touch upon the first 3 options. So when they ignore, they cooperate, or they attack these citizens' assemblies. And we have had 3 local level citizens' assemblies in Hungary so far. The first one was organized in Budapest. The second was in Miskolc, which is the 4th largest city in Hungary. And the last one, the most recent one, was organized in the city of Érd. And in all 3 cases, we've experienced different approaches from the local opposition. In the case of Budapest, the local opposition largely decided to ignore the whole process. So they did not really comment on it. The government media, of course, did attack the concept and us, but the opposition political parties remained silent. In the case of Miskolc, the local opposition party, Fidesz, the governing party, is in opposition in Miskolc. They were rather cooperative. So they came to the Citizens' Assembly to observe it. They spent half a day there. They were very supportive towards the process, and they openly said that it is a good approach to generate more lively public discourse around the topic. In the case of Érd, we experienced something different, because the local opposition party, again, Fidesz, attacked the whole process and attacked it by saying that it's an undemocratic process, that there are misconducts here and there. They labeled us, the organizing party organization, as the agents of George Soros, and they claim that whoever takes part in this process is technically misled by us and by the mayor and the ruling parties in the city. And that was the first time we experienced something like that. And it was not a pleasant experience, I must tell you that, especially initially. Though I also have to tell you that later on, the leader of the local opposition, who happens to be the former mayor of the city, did come to the Citizens' Assembly and spent like 15 minutes there to see what's going on. So in the end, I was very pleased that he showed some level of openness for one reason or another, and he came and spent some time with us. So yeah, this is where we are at this moment, and when we are organizing the next one, of course, this is going to be a big question. Let me just finish by saying this. our aim is to involve all political parties into the process. To what degree and in which sense, it's with what way is a different question. But I find it very important to bring everyone on board because, as said in the beginning, citizens' assemblies should be non-partisan and not apolitical, but independent processes.
But it's kind of interesting that the way that, at least the way that Shipyard did this in this instance, is to run it themselves independently, in order that they don't have that sort of sense of, oh, this belongs to one political party or another. Is that a model that might be something that you would consider in Hungary, or it's not your kind of approach?
It is a good question, because the question is, I think, what we want to use citizens' assemblies for. Is it purely political pressure, or just feeding in to political party agendas? Or if we want to a deeper political buy-in from the very beginning, and if we want to, work with political parties and governments and stakeholders much more closely from the very beginning of the process. But again, the running of the process should, by all means, be independent. That must be emphasized, and organizers must be impartial, of course. So I see actually a value in citizens' assemblies that are initiated and run and organized by an independent actor, a civil society organization or someone else. And I absolutely would love to see a national level citizens' assembly in Hungary. So we ourselves work for that to happen at some point in one way or another. But I also think that political buy-in is necessary, and even if the process is initiated by a civil society organization and run by a civil society organization, political forces should be, involved, or at least we should reach out to politicians to ensure that there is some level of political support, because of course, the higher the political support is, the higher the chances for the recommendations to be implemented or followed up later on by politicians.
Okay, thanks so much, Ava, for your thoughts. It's just really interesting to hear from another country that's also suffering from that sort of. I mean, not that countries in Western Europe don't have their own problems with polarization, but it's a similar kind of situation. So thank you very much for those thoughts and insights. Thank
you so much.
If I could bring back in the two Marias and Kuba, that would be great. I don't know if anyone's got any questions, please either raise your hand or put them in the chat. But one of the things that was put in the chat, which one of the Marias I think responded to, was the fact that actually some polling has just been done saying that something like a third of Poles have actually heard about the Citizens' Assembly, and also a very, very high level of support for the idea of kind of regularly holding these kind of processes and expecting politicians to respond, etc. So I'm just kind of interested that something that was run so independently, and at a time when you have the Ukraine war going on as well, that actually you've managed to have that kind of resonance. Are you surprised? Well, you're obviously pleased. Are you surprised?
Yes, so we are very pleased. I think we don't believe that is each third of Poles heard about the process. I guess some of them just heard about, because in Polish a panel is also a photovoltaic panel. And some of them did you hear about panel? So maybe some of them heard about photovoltaic panels.
Oh, that's brilliant. That is
some
excellent.
of them wanted to, not to be fools. So yes, of course, I've heard about this kind of process.
Okay.
It's my intuition that it wasn't that high, but still, I think that The recognition is quite impressive, and even if it's not 30%, maybe it's 10 or 20, it's still a huge amount for such organization as us, because we know we are recognized in bigger cities and like in the municipalities, local municipalities, but it was very impressive as such.
Well, I've just noticed that Danuta has got her hand up, so obviously either wants to make a question or a statement. So Danuta, did you want to just I don't know if Stina, if you want to
yes, but I put the hands too late because I have the question for Eva.
Oh, okay.
May I do it? Sorry,
yes,
Maria.
yes, okay, yeah.
Eva, I'm wondering of your opinion. What do you think? Which kind of methods instead of cooperation can give you more room to establish the association, civil association? Because to ignore attack of force, I think some of them can give you this room. You can use this as a opposite power.
As a counterpower.
Yeah, as a counterpower. What do you think?
So you mean when we are attacked, basically, that we can use it to explain more about the concept? And yes, I agree. This is what we try to do in ERD as well. I personally and my colleagues as well gave several interviews in local media, for example, and we were present in public places and try to explain everybody why it is important to have a citizens' assembly, what purpose it serves, and how it is organized, and we try to specifically answer all those questions the opposition asked, and also address those issues the opposition raised about the whole process. So indeed, it gave us some kind of a visibility. I actually was a bit worried initially that the attack coming from them may impact on the registration or the registration rate, that it would, make people feel less confident in being involved or registering, but it was not the case eventually. So we did not see any signs of that, and I was very happy about it.
What about ignoring process? Can you under this process, can you develop the society and to have to build the way to create a civil association?
I think communication is
association.
I think communication is super important when it comes to citizens' assemblies, and transparency is very, very important, and also to bring other stakeholders on board. Should they be other civil society organizations, experts, media, opinion leaders, and the more we are, of course, is the better, because there's more space to explain why it is important that we build bridges, and why it is important to bring everybody's opinion to the same room and try to come up with a solution together.
I think it's a really important learning. I think that we can't always expect the political context within which these things happen to be to be consensual. We're always trying to create this space for sort of for exchange across difference, for this kind of space of mutual respect. But what's going on outside it may be completely different, and actually sometimes citizens' assemblies will be part of the contestation rather than the nature of a contestation around the future of politics. And so I think actually there'll be more and more occasions as these things become more important that they become sites of major political conflict, actually. I don't think we can avoid that.
And just one more thing that actually I was wondering about this myself, and I think that it is difficult to tell why the local opposition reacted in one way in one city and another way in another city. So it could be, you know, the topic, it could be other local issues that we are not aware of, could be just the personality of certain politicians. So it is also an interesting thing and not always predictable, actually.
No, they're absolutely not predictable, I think, is the really important point. So I just want, we're almost at the end, so I'm just going to leave the floor to Maria and Kuba. And sorry, yeah. Just quickly, and I'll end with Kuba. But Maria, I'm just going to quick question: if you could do this again, and you are going to do it again, clearly, because Kuba is very keen on doing these kinds of processes. So what would you change next time you do it? What's your biggest thing that you would, what's the thing you want to take away, the lesson that you would take to the next time you do something like this? You've got your,
Yes. So there are a few things that we would definitely work on, the dissertation moment and bringing the recommendations into action, working with experts are the two parts that we need to focus and to make some changes. And doing it bottom up is a thing that we were talking a lot during this call, and this is something that makes a lot of difficulties, from the beginning to the end of the process. I don't know if it brings us to the question if we want to do it bottom up next time or not, but this is something that if we are doing it bottom up, we need to work on some changes as well, given this kind of process. Yeah, these are the things that we would change. The two phases is something to definitely to stick with.
No, I think that's a really interesting development, actually, really interesting innovation. So
just to make it like a really short answer, because I'm aware of timing.
Yeah, no, okay, that's okay.
I'm going to have some say as well.
Okay, so Kuba, last word to you. Is there anything you want to reflect on in terms of the conversation you just heard between Ava and I'm sure
that's very interesting, but it also reveals that I would say the answer for your question might be very different according to the outcome of the nearest election, because that might be a situation where it's almost like in many other countries in the world, including Hungary, you fortify democracy on the local level, especially in the municipal, more kind of bourgeois, kind of citizens type of and the dynamic of power is different. It's not by random that in Poland the biggest cities were basically involved in this assembly. It's another problem for people like us around. It's whether that, because in Poland they have a very strong presidential mandate, and very often what we do, including participatory budgeting, different kinds of a consultation, those presidents are basically tired with the small party politics locally, and they jump the fence using, just talk to people, and they give these promises. I think that it looks like a nice and cozy, although it's not very clear, including the general kind of a political contract saying, if enough of you want that thing, I'm going to provide. I think it's unfair it's impossible. It's impossible. So we have to work. The very important thing is the topic, because obviously if you are a president who are basically ready to anything, you have resources. Anyway, they choose the question. The other question, obviously, for you is what will be the topic of the conversation, because there are some topics which, for obvious reason, and that's obvious, it also creates a kind of a hope for the kind of a beyond party politics kind of agreement. Being honest, the reason in Poland is that we were basically visiting different political parties, trying to convince. There was basically more evenings. Even Senator Jazłowiecka was mentioning, we met in the Senate, which is the kind of opposition-led, but we also met in the kind of a parliament, in a sense, which is run by the current government. There was a very different dynamic. I was mentioned as, kind of embarrassing for me, guru type. I'm old, basically, and why I'm trying to say, I was the youngest participant of the 1989 roundtable conversation on the solidarity side. Reason I'm mentioning is that because of that fact that 30 years ago, and as you know, the Polish battle and polarization is around the people who basically, you know, we break the communism, if you like. Okay, so basically it means that I know people from many angles, so they answer the phone, but it's not easy to say, although Shipyard has a very, I think, reputation of Shipyard is that we are rebellions. But basically it's also, again, that you have to stretch extremely to have people from the other side even to listen to that thing. Yeah. But if you are a responsible politician and you know that in front of you, that's what I call Churchillian moment. If you have things which are beyond electoral politics, because if you are looking for a vote, obviously it's a bullshit because you don't need that thing, basically. Less people know, it's better. So you have a vote. The politics of voice is much more complicated, obviously, but sooner or later, and we were talking with many politicians who are either ruling or they're supposed to rule. They think, you know, the only way to come across the issue of, for example, reform of the health service, which is not 4 years, it's basically to work with people against a kind of a public rebellion to say, it's not what Macron is doing is exactly what is in the kind of every book play. Win the second election, you are not supposed to win the third one because it does not exist. You will be hated by people, but that's the moment when you can do the tough things. Obviously, there are not that many politicians. So basically, I think we present the thing as the depolarization, but also a kind of the only way why people can agree in a peaceful way to the politics, which means that they have more burden, if you like. Yeah. And I think responsible politics, that thing. So in an election, but there are other kind of strongholds of that. I think the local path, I think it will be kind of developed in Poland. You have this no return point in the EU, because as you know, you have every year, I think, third European panel. So basically, it means that they look for that. But anyway, I can talk for
no. But I think your point about trying to develop. I like your phrase about developing a politics of voice. I think that's really, really important. And I think you know, what we've seen in this project, which was was not a huge project in terms of you know, but shows the potential of your kind of approach in Poland. I think it's really, really impressive.
But I have a last word for the EU as a very influential group of both academic and practitioners. I was some kind of not surprised, but it has a mixed feeling about this defense of democracy package, which was developed by the Commission. It's understandable, and I think the question who is paying for politics is absolutely vital right now. But I think that we, and as I can subscribe myself to that group, and say, okay, defending democracy is not only controlling, it's also providing democracy with tools which are in the sense unavoidable. And there were several voices. Itself, if you see the voices, which was a public consultation, that was more than 1,000 voices, 70% of them were generated by this concerned citizens from Slovakia. Okay, itself, it's represent a kind of a question why 700 people from Slovakia, particularly from Slovakia, and saying, get off with that, because the whole kind of a melody was to know, get rid, we are democratic enough, we don't need your blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I would very much urge you to have a voice in this conversation, say to defend democracy, it's to have a, you know, practicing democracy. And the panel is one of those things.
And I think and what you're pointing to is the importance of building civic infrastructure is actually, you know, defending democracy actually means investing in democracy. I absolutely agree. On that very, very significant point, I'd like to thank Maria, Kuba, Agnieszka, Danuta, and Ava. It's been a really fascinating conversation. Please look on the Knoca website for our future events. Our next event, which will be in early May, I think, is on how we work with participants after the assembly process. Very interesting kind of questions about whether we have a responsibility to participants and what kinds of activities and actions we can support them in engaging with. But it's been a really interesting ride. I think we've gone to some really interesting places in this call, and I think it's generated a bunch of issues, particularly about the last point about how we build civic infrastructure that the Knowledge Network needs to spend much more time focusing about. But thank you to the audience, thank you to the participants, and thank you for my colleagues at the Danish Board of Technology for organising and facilitating the call. Take care, everybody. I wish you well.
Thank you.
Christian.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.